I watched my wife beat our monster son and didn't intervene because it would save our daughter, but my grandson may have finished the job. Fair warning. This story is extremely long. I apologize for that, but this is very difficult for me, and I've been carrying it for many years. At my therapist's recommendation, I've written it all down to try and process my feelings about it. He didn't recommend publishing it on Reddit, of course, but I've struggled with this for a long time and need to hear other people's opinions. I still have no idea how I feel about it even after all these years, but I submit it to the judgment of the masses. I know I did wrong in some things, probably many. I tried to do the best I could. My son had so many problems, so many problems. If you've seen the movie. We need to talk about Kevin. It will help you greatly understand what I'm talking about because I swear that when I watched that movie, I thought I was watching a documentary of my life. I felt like the screenwriter must have had hidden cameras in my damn house. That's how accurate it was. The only difference is that in the movie, the child appears normal to his father and only shows his true nature to the mother. In my son's case, he didn't have that mask. His insane behavior was the same with everyone. From the day he was born, my son just came out wrong. He was a planned child. My wife and I tried to get pregnant and were euphoric when he was born. He was a desired and loved child. We showered him with affection and truly tried to give him a happy childhood, but from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was miserable. He cried for 13 straight months. I'm not exaggerating. 13 months without pause, crying until he lost his voice and still kept crying. His little face was wrinkled and no sound came out, completely voiceless. There were times when he literally cried in his sleep. I've never seen or heard of another child capable of doing that. We took him to specialists, tried changing his diet. We cradled him, played music for him, put up mobiles, gave him toys, everything we could think of. Nothing worked. 13 months of an exhausting, sleepless hell. When that crying phase passed, we thought we had overcome the worst, but it soon became clear that for some unknown reason, he was angry to be alive. I never saw that child smile with genuine joy in all the time I knew him. I saw him make horrible and perverse smiles many times, taking sick pleasure in causing pain, suffering, or breaking a rule, but a smile for something beautiful or pleasant, no, never, not once. He wasn't interested in anything positive. He was driven by hatred, and everything he did was aimed at that. As soon as he could walk, his mission in life was to destroy things. He broke or tried to break everything nearby, hitting it, biting it, throwing it in the toilet, whatever. Then he learned to take off his diaper and enjoyed urinating and defecating wherever he could. Then he discovered how to hide it and started doing it in places where we wouldn't find it immediately, which made it harder to clean and stank up the house. When he was older, between 9 and 15 years old, he would urinate and defecate in our bed. We had to put a lock on the door to prevent it. Then he started defecating in the hallway in front of our room. That biological warfare began around 2.5 years old, and he never outgrew it. I'll try to summarize because I could talk about this for days, but as he grew, he became more uncontrollable. He would bite, kick, scream, scratch, and spit at anyone who tried to interact with him. He was expelled from school twice before he was 9. Then he was readmitted and expelled permanently again. He had to change schools. In the new one, he was placed in a special class separate from the rest of the students. We had to put a locked door on the kitchen because he would steal knives to destroy walls, furniture, or chase people. When he was 10, he stabbed me quite severely in the hip and buttock. I still have the scars. As he grew darker. He started setting things on fire and torturing animals. There was a stray dog that roamed the park near our house. My son blinded it in one eye with a barbecue fork. He set cats' tails on fire with gasoline. He became a violent, stinky, cruel beast living in our house. We couldn't do anything with him. I'll take this opportunity to preempt the flood of messages. Yes, the child went to therapy. He went to a psychiatrist twice a week and was on who knows how many different medications over the years. Nothing worked. Therapy didn't work. Medications didn't work. Nothing worked. He was like a toxic cloud of hatred and fury that attacked everything near him. When my son was 16, my wife became pregnant again. I cannot describe how different our reaction was. Instead of joy, we felt horror. This pregnancy was unplanned, and we truly didn't know what to do. Our son had been an endless nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't imagine starting over. We talked a lot about terminating the pregnancy, but access to abortion wasn't as easy in those days as it is now, and my wife was very against it. We discussed many options. In the end, we decided that my wife would have the baby, and if it turned out to be evil, we would give it up for adoption. We knew we couldn't go through the same thing again. We had a daughter. She was normal. Suddenly, we saw what our life should have been all this time, what things would be like if our son hadn't been the way he was. She laughed at things nursed without biting. Of course, she didn't have teeth yet, but it was clear she was just trying to feed, not rip her mother's breast off. By 4 months, she was sleeping through the night. She was happy she was normal. I cannot describe the relief and happiness we both felt. I have no words for it. I think that's when I really started to drift away from my son. Until then, no matter how many mistakes I might have made, I always tried to do what was best for him. I am convinced of that. I tried to help him, to love him, to care for him. I really tried. But when our daughter was born, my wife and I instinctively just turned toward her. She became our focus, not out of malice, but because it was so easy. She was so happy, so sweet. Every moment with her was like magic. I know it was wrong, but honestly, we couldn't help it. I don't have a better explanation than that. My son didn't give a damn that my wife was pregnant. Honestly, I don't know if he even understood it, but when we brought our daughter home, he started behaving even worse. I didn't think it was possible, but he took it to another level. At that time, he was 17, and we had explosive shouting matches every day. Usually after arguing, he would storm out of the house and disappear for hours or return the next morning. It was a relief. We started to look forward to those fights because they got him away from us for a while. After our daughter's birth, my relationship with my son had practically disintegrated. Our only real interaction was screaming at each other. My wife was even worse with him. She had nothing left to give. By then, if our son even entered the same room as her, she would simply stop what she was doing and start shouting, "Get away from me! Get out! Get the hell out!" until he left. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I have no idea what he did outside, but we were happy that he wasn't doing it with us. As a result of our son's behavior, we had invested heavily in locks inside the house. All the cheap, thin interior doors had been replaced with thick, solid wooden doors that couldn't be kicked in and were equipped with key locks. My wife and I carried the keys with us. I know it sounds extreme, but the reinforced locks and doors were the best way we found to create safe spaces from him. And again, before I get flooded with messages, no, we didn't lock our son up like a prisoner. He had complete freedom to move around the house and come and go as he pleased. My wife and I were the ones who locked ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. If anything, we were the prisoners in our own home. On the day in question, I had argued with my son in the morning, and he left the house in a rage. My wife and I were enjoying some peace in the kitchen while our daughter napped in our room, and then she started crying. Any parent with young children can tell you that you learn to distinguish a baby's cries over time. They cry differently if they're hungry, if their diaper needs changing, or if they're just fussy and want to be held. Babies can communicate quite well even before they speak. But this cry was none of those. It was a cry of terror. As soon as we heard it, my wife and I shot up from our chairs and ran to the room. The door was, of course, locked, and it took us a few seconds to find the right key and open it. My son was in the room. We lived in a single-story house, and the bastard had climbed through the window to get in. He was standing by the crib with a butcher knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it. It wasn't one of ours. We carefully controlled our knives and kept them locked away. I think he stole it from a neighbor's house. He had already cut her skin twice, once on her abdomen and once on her arm. I could see the blood running. When I entered the room, he was dragging the blunt side of the knife across her little face, not cutting, almost tickling her, taunting her as she screamed. He looked at us and smiled. Before I could even think about what I was doing, I was already moving, running to get between them. I didn't think. I just acted on instinct. Even so, my wife got there first. It was like a fast emotion film. She reached our son, slapped his hand, sending the knife flying across the room, and then shoved him with her full body weight so hard that he flew back and bounced off the wall. I picked up my daughter and hugged her while my wife positioned herself between us and him. I could see her trembling, almost convulsing. I remember the smell in the room, the sound of my daughter screaming and crying, the expression on my son's face as he stood there. He felt absolutely nothing. Empty, dead, there was nothing in his eyes. No emotion. He seemed like an alien to me. I watched my wife take a step toward him. I could have stopped her, but I didn't. She took another step very close to him. I could have stopped her again, but I didn't. She waited, looked at him for about 3 to 5 seconds without moving, and then punched him in the face. Until this point, you might have been imagining my wife as a typical woman, small, framed, delicate, fragile, but that's not her at all. My wife does have a small body, but she's anything but delicate and fragile. She never has been since I've known her. Since her adolescence, my wife has been a boxer. Mixed martial arts didn't exist back then, but karate and boxing were popular, and she was a very talented amateur. She weighed about 60 kilograms and 132 pounds, had a lot of muscle mass, and knew how to hit. I outweighed her by over 30 kilograms or 66 pounds at the time, and I have no doubt that in a real fight between her and me, she would have flattened me. Neither of us had ever laid a hand on our son in anger before, But that day, something broke in her, and all the years of anger, pain, sadness, and frustration simply burst out. When she hit him, his head whipped back and blood began to gush from his nose. He barely reacted, just looked at her with an expression of surprise, as if he didn't know how to process what had just happened. She waited another second and then hit him again. I could have stopped her. I could have pulled her out of the room, taken her away, calmed her, but I didn't. I just stood there watching as she systematically demolished him. Every time he raised his hands to cover one part, she hit another. Body head, over and over. He started screaming, crying, begging her to stop. It was the most genuine reaction I had ever seen him have in his entire life. But she didn't stop. I saw her intensify, hitting harder, faster, working him over like a punching bag. He tried to hit her, and she effortlessly dodged him. She was on autopilot, completely immersed in her training. I stood there watching for a minute. Then I turned my back on them and took my daughter out of the room. I carried my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I discovered that he had made a third cut on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed down. I put polysporin and Band-Aids on her wounds. From our bedroom, I could hear my son screaming, calling my wife horrible insults, telling her he was going to cut off her head and fuck her corpse. After a while, I didn't hear him say anything anymore, not even scream. I assumed he must have passed out, but I could still hear her hitting him. That went on for quite a while, long enough for my daughter to fall asleep in my arms. I just sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to finish. She finally came out and sat across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. She was breathing heavily. We just looked at each other without saying a word. After a while, I asked, "Is he dead?" She looked at me and replied, "I fucking hope so." I nodded. That was all that was said about it. I perfectly understood how she felt. I felt the same way. I didn't know what to do, so we just sat there in silence. Eventually, my wife started crying and went to shower. I stayed where I was, holding our daughter. After a good while, I heard groans and sobs coming from our room. It turned out our son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad he was, and he was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating inflicted on anyone before or since. He was lying on the floor, writhing with blood pouring from his face, lying in a pool of vomit. His nose was completely crushed to one side of his face, both eyes were completely swollen shut and already starting to turn black. I saw that a couple of his fingers were bent at odd angles and he had wet himself. I think he was missing teeth, but I didn't see any on the floor, and I couldn't see inside his mouth. His lips were all swollen and disfigured. Speaking with my wife about this afterwards, I learned that she had systematically hit every part of his body, focusing especially on his legs. She told me she had kicked him repeatedly in the groin until her legs got tired, and that she kept hitting him long after he passed out. When my wife came out of the shower, I still didn't know what to do with our son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance or take him to the hospital myself. Honestly, I had no idea what to do. Soon after, I realized that I simply no longer cared what happened to him, and we decided to let him live or die on his own. There was a separate apartment in the basement that we had almost never used, and my wife, daughter, and I moved there. We simply ceded the upstairs of the house to our son and locked everything, completely separating our lives. There was enough food in the upstairs cabinets for a couple of weeks or more. It had a bathroom and bedrooms. We had a bathroom in the basement, a small kitchen, and a separate entrance, so we simply stopped going upstairs. We decided we didn't want to know anything more about him. I thought we would let him run out of food and see what happened. For the next week, we could sometimes hear him moving upstairs. I think he spent most of the time lying in bed recovering. I went to work with my senses on high alert in case he tried to attack me in the driveway, but he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. We never let her out of our sight. One night we heard him completely unhinged, breaking things and hitting. We didn't respond, but he never tried to come downstairs or approach us. I think he was afraid that if he came near my wife would finish what she started. After 3 weeks of living in the basement, we hadn't heard anything from upstairs in several days, so I ventured up. The place was destroyed and there was no trace of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done and return the main floor to normal. There was food and shit smeared on the walls, broken glass on the floor, large holes in the wall. He had destroyed everything. He ripped up the linoleum in one corner of the kitchen and emptied a foam extinguisher throughout the living room. I am grateful that he didn't burn the house down with us inside. Honestly, I don't know why he didn't. That boy never had qualms about setting things on fire. After that, I lived in fear every day that he would return, that he would ambush us out of nowhere and try to kill us. We moved to another house about 3 years later, and I finally stopped being afraid that he would appear again, as he now had no idea where we were. I finally felt safe from him. All this happened a long time ago. My son was born in the spring of 1971. My daughter was born in '88. I am an old man now. I turned 70 this year, and my wife died of cancer in 2016. My daughter is now 31. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife died. I have two granddaughters, and they are the joy of my life. I see a therapist a couple of times a month to talk about all this. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him was when he was lying on the floor of our room bleeding and beaten to a pulp. I haven't heard from him since he left over 30 years ago, and I don't want to know. I carry a lot of guilt from that time and many mixed emotions. I didn't hit him directly, but I allowed him to be beaten, and I thought he deserved it. I was glad it happened. I didn't try to kill him, but I would have been happy if he had died. I will say that I hope he managed to overcome his demons and lead a normal life somewhere. If he didn't, if he remained as he was, then I sincerely hope someone out there killed him. As I knew him, he was a rabid dog, and either way, I just hope he's no longer out there harming anyone else. Edit. My wife was without a doubt an incredible woman, the strongest and most beautiful I ever knew. I'll let her know you approve of that even though she's no longer with us. I still talk to her frequently. Of course I know his name. I gave it to him. It was my father's name. You're right. Maybe I could find some record about him, but honestly, I don't think I will. I don't see what good that could bring into my life. Either I'll discover he's dead and feel nothing about it, or that he's in prison for harming someone, and then I'll spend the rest of my life regretting not having finished the job when I had him lying at my feet. At that moment, I thought about putting a pillow over his face and ending him, but I chose not to. I would hate myself if I discovered that my choice caused another poor soul to suffer from his madness. Comment. If your son was white, approximately 6'8", tall, thin, with blue-green eyes, dark brown hair, and a scar on his left hand from when his own teeth cut his skin after being beaten, then I might be your grandson. My father was born in the spring months of 1971. He claimed to have no family and was a cruel and horrible person until the last second of his life. I'll probably post that story on this same subreddit after work, but suffice it to say that I endured everything he did to me during the 8 years I was forced to live with him. I saw him kill cats and dogs. He set my hair on fire a couple of times because he liked the smell. I have several scars from his use of a knife as a correction tool. I would appreciate it if you could send me a private message and we can see if you truly are my grandfather or if simply two horrible people with the same characteristics and born in the same season of the same year in the same country existed by coincidence. Possible grandson of original poster. Let's start with the simplest thing why I'm posting this. A while ago, a story was posted here about how a man stood by and almost let his wife kill his son. Well-deserved, as I recall, and it has been frequently covered by YouTube channels that read Reddit posts. I left a comment because many of the details in that post almost exactly matched my father's description with some differences that might simply be his lies to make himself look better. I never received a response from the author, but I received many messages from people asking for more details, etc. I will change some things and omit names and places as they could eventually lead back to me, and I'm not interested in that. I had a good childhood until 2002 when my mom died of cancer. My grandmother died a month later from heart failure, and U.S. Social Services removed me from there to take me to my biological father, as I had two older brothers who simply didn't want to take care of me. Everything was fine for about 6 months, as he put on a whole show for Child Protective Services, enough so they wouldn't do follow-up visits. In 2003, my father broke my right arm with a metal fence post. Since there were no more Child Protective Services visits, the abuse got worse. He would hit me with phone books, put out lit cigarettes on my back, shoulders, arm, and hand, and during months without school, he would beat me unconscious. He cooked meth-sold drugs. Used drugs had no teeth and no real job. If you don't understand why someone would use a phone book to hit, it's because it distributes the impact over a wide enough area to avoid leaving obvious bruises. I was only allowed to eat soup the entire time I lived there, and only 1 can a day. I took extra classes in school to stay out of the house longer and take advantage of school lunches as my real source of nutrients. I graduated with academic honors and presidential recognition 2 years early in 2007, and I lied to him to get out of the house saying I was going to school when I was actually going to work to save money and escape. But plans don't always work out as expected. He discovered my lie and ended up stealing all my savings, forcing me to quit my job and keeping me locked in the garage until he ran out of money. Many asked me why I didn't call anyone. I wasn't allowed to have a phone and there was no phone in the house. Eventually, he realized he could force me to work as a minor, and since I couldn't open a bank account without an ID, birth certificate, or any other document, he could cash my checks and have full access to the money. He allowed me to go out again. I tried to escape several times, but praised the police's strict adherence to the law as they repeatedly returned me to his care, and that usually resulted in him subjecting me to simulated drowning or cutting me superficially with a knife. A little over a year passed, and I managed to save enough in cash tips to feel confident leaving. Also, my 18th birthday was a week away, which meant I would only have to survive on my own for 1 week. And in that case, a runaway report would be treated as a missing adult. I packed my things, and as I was preparing to leave early in the morning, I turned around and there he was with a metal baseball bat in his hand. The first blow knocked my right eye out of its socket. The second broke my jaw joint. The third broke 2 ribs on my left side. The fourth fractured my hip. The fifth broke my left knee. The sixth broke all my front teeth and my nose. The seventh broke my right shoulder, and on the eighth I managed to catch the bat, which burst 3 knuckles on my right hand, broke my thumb, and dislocated my pinky finger. I dropped my things and ran for the door to escape. If you've never been in a drug addict's house, you wouldn't know this, but they have like 8 locks on the front door and 2 on the back, so I went out the back. Head wounds bleed a lot. So as I ran, gushing blood everywhere with my eye hanging out of its socket and in unbearable pain, I slipped on the kitchen tile floor, knocking a pan off the stove that had hot, greasy ground meat in it. I got pretty burned, and as I tried to get up and get out, my father jumped on me. He stabbed me 17 times, and as he was telling me I would never leave alive, I managed to grab the pan and broke his neck with it. That image still haunts me to this day and gives me nightmares that prevent me from sleeping. I got out from under him, went out the back door, walked a block from my house, and rang the doorbell of some new neighbors. I died on their porch before they opened the door. I died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I died at the hospital and 3 more times during the operation. I was discharged from the hospital 4 months after turning 18 with a medical bill that was initially in the millions. Without an ID or any kind of documentation, and with no living relatives, I was on the street and penniless. I could have filed for bankruptcy, but that would have done terrible damage to someone who had just turned 18. So I worked with the hospital, and they managed to reduce the debt to $181,765.53. I eventually managed to sort out my documentation and started working 3 minimum wage jobs to pay off my hospital debt. I was homeless that entire time, as most apartments wouldn't rent to someone with that kind of outstanding debt. It took me 10 years, but I paid every last cent. Now I have my own apartment and a decent job, although I look like I lost a fight with running lawnmower blades, and I lost as badly as you can imagine. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and depression, but no real adult gets very far in life without at least one, if not both. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, but I'm too scary. I have scars, burns, and a clearly fake eye, and my memory is too affected by brain injuries to be able to do it. I no longer have a filter, and anything I say is the truth as I see it. I can't lie in person because if I stop to think about what I'm going to say before I say it, I start to stutter so badly it would take me an hour to order something at McDonald's. Fortunately, my current employer sees that as an advantage. I tell him when he messes up. I can't have children. I have no living relatives, and I'm not going to tell the story of my older brothers because it's depressing. And honestly, just using Google voice recognition to write this has already triggered enough traumatic memories. I've also been asked why I chose this username Lucifer himself, 666, for almost everything I have online, especially by religious people who have been offended. The answer is in the story I've told you today. I am the one who was rejected and scorned by his father, so it simply fits. Just to be clear that all of this was legal when I was tried for my father's murder, I was found not guilty, and it was determined to be in self-defense according to forensic evidence. The only reason there was a trial was because his toothless girlfriend at the time said I had attacked him first. She conveniently vanished from the face of the earth before I even regained consciousness in the hospital. And as the police department told me, in a city that large, finding a drug addict is like looking for a needle in a haystack. I think that's all. I'm quite tired. I'm just going to check the spelling and make sure Google voice recognition hasn't messed anything up, and then I'm going to sleep, too.